There's been a question that's been popping up for, I believe, years now at this point. And the question is, how do you average difficulty? Or, more or less, as a famous quote is being said, how do you make Dark Souls easy? Like, how do you make it into easy mode? And this topic has come up a lot. And really, in all honesty, I would never have the subject being put in place until I started to play a particular game known as Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption. It made me literally think, okay, so to kind of summarize how Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption works, is that the only way you can get access to fighting each of the individual sins is if you sacrifice a piece of yourself, and that piece of yourself can average from any form of stat effects. Some of them will reduce your HP and stamina, either your attack, defense. It could either make you more acceptable when you run out of stamina. It could reduce your HP files. It can reduce your inventory, or it just makes your shield completely easy to destroy when you try to block it. It's one of those things where it's so well in place that it makes you literally think, okay, this is my weakness technically. It literally makes you think. But I'll do a mini review of it later on. But for the time being right now, I want to talk about this subject in hand because the level of difficulty is not within the realm of oh, let's change a stat here, or let's change a stat here, and stuff like that. Because a lot of people says that the difficulty within Dark Souls is that the enemies either hit too hard, or stuff like that. No, the difficulty is not within the stats of the game. It's more about the gameplay of the game, And the funny thing is that we still use the term Souls-like. Sinner, which is the most recent game that's come out right now, is still being termed as a Souls-like game. And arguably, yes, it is kind of Souls-like. I will not argue about that. It does have Souls-like element that makes it a Souls game. But there's enough in there that makes it its own unique game. And that's what I like about it, is that it makes its own unique gameplay style. It stands out a little bit beyond a Souls-like game. Now that being said, there is also that fact that when it comes down to difficulty, the difficulty is not within the stats, it's within the gameplay. Game developers program these games specifically in order to make it challenging or fun and entertaining for players like ourselves. If it's entertaining enough to keep our interest, then it's enough for them to proceed that particular gameplay style. With Dark Souls, their gameplay style is basically action RPG element with subtle ways of the gameplay being different. Now the funny thing is, me and a friend of mine, we've talked about this a lot. And I mean an insane a lot. It has come up so many times, it is insane. And we both made an agreement, and a lot of people will disagree on this one. But we both agree that Dark Souls is an artificial, difficult game. Artificial. The game itself does not have to be difficult, but within the program itself, it is difficult. So, what do I mean by the program itself? Well, Dark Souls basically has a lot in terms of program. So first off, let's talk about the character itself. Now, the character program itself is that it is basically designed to be slow. It is meant to be slow. You are weighed down by armor. And that armor, depending on the net weight of that armor, depends on how slow you will go. For in other words, if you wear Haval's armor, you will not run. You will just trot as you're running. This is your running cycle. You went from this to just this as a running cycle. And depending on your overall weight capacity that you can actually carry, you're not going to be able to carry heavy armor. So you have to monitor what armor that you can actually wear. And depending on the armor type itself, depends on the net weight itself that you can actually wear. So that's one factor. The other factor is the weapon type itself. If you are wielding a buster sword or a hammer, you're not meant to hit fast, you're meant to hit hard, but it's going to be slow deliverance. You're supposed to wind up for the hit and then execute the attack. That's how a heavy weapon works. And for buster swords and hammers of that sort, that's how it works. If you have a lightweight sword, then yes, you can wield it at a faster rate. You can hit faster, you can hit people quicker. The only issue is that you're not delivering that much damage afterwards. It's like the bigger the weapon, the more damage, but you're going to be slower because it's that much heavier that you have to carry. If you have a lighter weapon, you're going to be wielding it a lot faster, but you're not going to be doing that much damage to begin with, And this is all because of physical reaction of the gameplay. And another thing too is that technically in Dark Souls, you cannot jump. There is leap. That's basically the best that you can do, is a leap. And it's not even a good leap, it's just a leap. Even if you run, dashing it as hard as you can, it's just a leap. That's all it is. There is no jump. And if there was a mechanic to where the character could jump and attack at the same time, like in Kingdom Hearts, it would be a completely, totally different experience. You're jumping and you're attacking the boss. You have more mobile ability than that of the bosses themselves. So the character itself is very limited, and because of that, it makes the game difficult. Now let's talk about the enemies themselves. The enemies come in two forms. You have the overwhelming crowd enemy types, and then you have the one powerful enemy that will overpower you. The game wants you to think how to approach that enemy, or that enemy crowd. How are you going to go about it? Are you going to attack it from a distance with a bow or throwing knives or spells? Are you going to fight it up close with a heavy club to where you can hope to stagger it? What form of attack are you going to deliver when you're fighting it? The game wants you to think on how you're going to approach it. And every single time you get further into the game, that's how it goes about it. Another situation that I hear a lot of people talk about is that the number of bonfires. With the amount of bonfires in the game, you can get progressively farther in the game. In fact, there was a point in time during development that the bonfire could actually go with you. You could take the bonfire with you, and you could basically make it anywhere within the world. With a mechanic like that, that would be interesting, but at the same time, that would make it that much more challenging. Because every single time you go to a bonfire, the enemy respawns, regardless of where you're at. Which means, if you were to spawn in an area where an enemy encounterment is very heavily stormed, then by the time you get out of that bonfire, the enemy will tackle you. So you've got the fact that that mechanic is there, but the reason why it was not encouraged was because of the fact that it would make things even harder. I would argue with the fact that by creating a bonfire anywhere would make it that much more harder, because you're more susceptible to creating a bonfire when you're desperate. Anytime that there's a bonfire, between the distance between where you're at currently right now and where the next destination bonfire will be at, that's your range of difficulty. And depending on how you go about it, depends on the difficulty at hand. And depending on that part, depends entirely on how you're going to make it there. Is it going to be a slugfest just to get there? Or is it going to be a breeze to where you can just run through it all and stuff like that? And that's basically one point of difficulty, is the amount of checkpoints it takes just to get to the next one. If you can make it to the next checkpoint, that will judge the difficulty at hand. Now let's talk about another interesting subject, and that is the amount of um, help that you can require. Now in Dark Souls in particular, the mechanic is that if you get help at all, like summons help and stuff like that, the game is designed to get stronger. It's not going to be harder, but the enemy will get stronger. So in other words, if the enemy even hits you, then chances are it's going to be that much quicker for you to die. So basically, as you get more help, the game becomes more stronger to oppose against you. So in other words, difficulty does not really change, it's just they get stronger. So I would argue that it doesn't really get harder, it just, the enemy becomes stronger. And depending on your skills with the game, if you can avoid a hit at all, then at that point the difficulty will not affect you. And I think a lot of hardcore gamers will agree with me whenever I say that, is that depending on your skill level, depending on if you're able to avoid the enemy attack or not, depends solely on that difficulty. And now let's go on ahead and talk about bosses per se. Bosses are basically the big access when it comes to the Souls series, and admittedly so, they are like the main targets of the game. The majority of the bosses, when you beat them, you do encounter another bonfire, which is a form of checkpoint. They deliver a large amount of souls, which is your currency for leveling up. They can give you a soul piece, which allows you to make an additional weapon that you may want to attain and stuff like that. So the bosses themselves, like I said before, the bosses are designed to be a giant wall to block you. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard. So let's look at Dark Souls 1. I think the easiest boss, and this is me talking, but the easiest boss that can arguably be beaten, and I have to literally think about this as like a first time person going through it. Like if you're going through the game for the first time, which is going to be easier? Arguably the easiest boss to fight would have to be the actual Asylum Demon himself. That is going to be the easiest boss to fight. And I say this because of the fact it's meant to be an easy boss. He's not doing that much damage, he's fairly slow and easy to telegraph. And depending on if you've got your weapon or not, depends on how easy it's going to be. Arguably, you can just be dumb and try to kill it with the broken sword, which there are people who have done challenges with the broken sword, and some of them have succeeded. I don't know, I've never watched them, and I wouldn't be suicidal enough to try. But it can be done. It can be done. The hardest boss that I think, in terms of like first time going through it, the hardest boss would probably be... Now I'm having to think about it. I hadn't really thought of it now. It's like, what was the hardest boss to go through for the first time? The one that took me the most time, rather. Cease the Scaleless was the hardest one. Mostly because of the fact that it has just a humongous range of attack that it can reach you. Keep in mind, you still have to try to fight Cease the Scaleless. Even if you finally destroy the crystal when you go for the second attempt, whenever you go into the crystal cavern and stuff like that, he's going to be hard, and he has a large range of attack that will hurt you. For example, he has his crystal ice breath move that he can do, which will implement curse, and if that curse is implemented, your HP gets reduced. You have the fact that if you are close enough to his back tail or anything like that, he will try to slam it on your head and stuff. And despite the fact that he's very slow, he's very wide. His tentacle-like tails are wide enough to prevent you from moving any faster. It's like, even if you're like the lightest weight character, if you are able to move fast enough, you're not going to get around Cease that quickly. He is that difficult to kill, in my personal opinion. Your only way of fighting against Thief, and this is with me having experience fighting Thief, and I've actually been able to finally beat Thief the Scaleless by myself. I used to not be able to beat him by myself at all. He was like the hardest boss for me for the longest period of time. Now he's one of the easy bosses that I can kill with no problem. All you have to have is a very sturdy, heavy hidden weapon and just stay right in his front chest. That's all you gotta be, right in front of his head. His ice breath is at that angle to where he will miss you. He will miss you with that breath because there's that much distance that you have room to be right up at his face practically, and you can just deal damage to him. Until he starts to have that crystal glow, that's when you need to run. But you get what I'm saying. Because of the fact that I've played it so many times, I know how to go about the game. And that's the level of difficulty that comes out of it. Isn't so much of the fact of gameplay or stats. It's the knowledge that you have with that game. And the funny thing is this too. I actually went into this game knowing it was going to be hard. I went into this game knowing all of his secrets. I looked up a particular YouTuber, I forgot his name. I'll try to look up the video series to where you guys can look it up yourself. He did a very nice job of a walkthrough. Not to say that fighting Cowboy isn't any better. He does a really good job when it comes to walkthrough and stuff. But this guy did a very good job of doing a walkthrough of Dark Souls and kind of explaining the mechanics and stuff like that. He did a very excellent job in my opinion. He doesn't really upload that much Dark Souls content anymore, but at the time that he did it, he was very well an expert when it comes to being able to fight through Dark Souls and making it easy for everyone. And it was because of him that I was basically not only encouraged to pick up the game, but I was encouraged to push through the game, to keep going at it because of how difficult it is. And because of its difficulty, I actually do encourage you to look up videos on how to get through the game. Because it is designed to kill you, okay? It is designed to kill you. That is the main essence of the game, is death. And if the game is designed for you to die multiple times, it's going to do that. It will do that. It is not a matter of a situation in which where you suck. It is not the fact that the game is too hard. It is designed to kill you. It has traps that will kill you. It has enemies in bullshit areas that are designed to kill you. You have obstacles that are designed to kill you. You have NPCs that if you even piss them off are designed to kill you. You have invaders. Their main purpose is to kill you. You are destined to die in this game multiple times. That is how this game works. And if you have a problem with dying multiple times in a game, then obviously this game is not meant for you. That is how the game is designed. And if a game is designed for you to die multiple times, then that is how it works. If a game is meant to be hard, that is within its design. It is not a flaw, it is how it is designed. And then we can go on to another implemented subject where I say the best way to make it easier is be more familiar with the game. You know, people say, oh, well, the boss had less HP, or the boss doesn't hit hard, you have better defense, you can run faster, you can jump. All of that being said, yes, that is possible. That could change the game entirely in terms of difficulty. But what makes the game difficult is the lack of knowledge on how to proceed the game. Imagine if you looked up as much information you could about a boss, or as much information on certain items, certain weapons that you didn't know existed, and you realized this one thing could help you beat that boss. If you knew about that one access, that boss becomes nothing. The point is that by knowing how the game works and knowing your area of expertise, knowing what you can do to make it easier, that's where the difficulty lies. It's not within the game premise, it's within your knowledge of how to proceed that game. Once you have that level of understanding, the difficulty drops from there. And depending on your skill level, depending on how far you're willing to go in terms of customizations, for example, if you're able to make a heavy hidden tank, and by heavy hidden tank, we're talking about it as something absurd as like the Haval build, then yeah, you can pretty much plow through every boss, you know? You are able to absorb attacks with no problem. You don't receive as much damage. You hit harder, and thus you deal way more damage than you normally would deal with. And there are people out there who have made so many creative builds, it is insane. There's even one build that has been classified to be called the Glass Cannon. I'm sure you've heard of this term, the Glass Cannon. The reason why it's called a Glass Cannon is that it is meant to be a boss destroying character. It is meant to rape the boss. It is meant to treat the boss like as though as if it's a miserable ant and it will be squashed every time. But if the boss even gets one hit at you, you die. That's it, you're dead. And that's why it's called the Glass Cannon. It's because it is so powerful. But because it is so powerful, the reason why it's so powerful is because there are items that makes the attack increase when your HP is low. Thus, you are vulnerable for one-hit KOs. So, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the level of difficulty is not within the game premise. The level of difficulty, it lies within your own mind and within your own skill. That's why the game series themselves have gotten so popular. It's because you got so many people who are so well adjusted into these games, and they're able to figure out, okay, this is how the enemy works, now I need to adjust it in a way that I can implement damage onto it. Once a person knows about the area, and once a person knows about the bosses themselves, getting through the area becomes less and less of a challenge. But that's just me saying this. I could be completely wrong about it. This is just me from my experience from playing difficult games I've noticed. And it's something that I've been hearing a lot, and I figure I kind of throw in my 2 bits of it. So, hope you enjoyed this little thought about it. So, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.